Welcome back to another episode of Ramblin' Park. This is version. Yeah, we'll go with four. Four sounds good. Yeah. So anyway, back with Barnacle Boi here because we finally got some parts in for it. You may notice there something is missing. That's because we're dealing with something. I know we still got to deal with the exhaust and all that stuff. Working on that. But first off, let's do something on these handlebars because if you can't make it go where you want to go, that's kind of a problem. So, yeah, first up on these handlebars, I got to put some holes in them. That way I can put some switches in them that gets all the electrons to go from your brain to your thumbs to the bike and to the parts on the bike that you want to go round and round and make motorcycle sounds. We got our bars mocked up. I've just got the grips stuck on here for now. I just blew them on there with an air hose. It's pretty easy too. No glue, nothing like that, but if you want to move them around, just take an air blower, stick it underneath the corner of your grip, give it a little shot of air, it'll float around and go wherever you want it to go. So we just got them hanging there with some air right now. They're just stretched over the handlebars. They're not glued in or anything. We haven't got any safety wire on them. But we got our hand controls roughly about where we want them. About the angle that we want them. I mocked it up on the bike before I pulled them off, stick them in the vise here because extra hands. I only got two. What we're going to do now that we've got our hand controls roughly laid out where we're going to put them, we need to figure out where things are going to land from an ergo standpoint. Because we got to drill a couple of holes in these bars to mount our switches that we're running all of our electrics, namely our horn, our dimmer, and our starter button. We're going to have one right here. And that's the go button. And then we're going to have two over here. One of them is going to be for the I can't see where I'm going and I need it brighter button. And the third one is for the hey asshole, don't do that, get out of my way button. All right, cool. Let's poke some holes into these things. I was happy. I bought me a new set of drill bits. Hopefully they'll hold up better and do a better job than the last crap-ass set I had. Well, that seemed like it chewed through there pretty good. Let's try it again. Let's grab one of our switches and see how it fits. Need to make it a hair bit bigger. Whew, that's snug. Now if I can get the thing back out of there. Drill and wobble. That is the order of the day. Perfect. Good there, fit good there. All right, cool. I'll take that. I know, it's only 3 holes, but I'm really impressed with how well those things cut, especially considering my last set of Harbor Freight drill bits. What those are, that is the Harbor Freight Cobalt drill bits. The set that I bought is the 115-piece drill index, where it's got wire gauges from 1 to 60, and then it's got lettered and fractional bits. I do a lot of weird stuff, so I need some oddball size stuff like that. But they're $100 at Harbor Freight, and honestly, $100 for 115 drill bits that are allegedly 8% cobalt. Results to be determined, but so far so good. That's a pretty good deal. And all things considered, that's pretty cheap in the grand scheme of things. I mean, that's cheap for a half-ass decent high-speed steel drill index set. But the thing is, if you guys are interested, you might want to go check them out at Harbor Freight because I've been looking at them for a while, and you know me, I'm a tight ass. And it kind of hurt dropping $100 on a set of drill bits. However, I was able to take advantage of that 20% off coupon that they had the other day for Labor Day. Those things are coming out more and more often here. Y'all keep your eye out for them. Total up, I was into them for 80 bucks. Now, I can't bitch about that. But if you're interested in them, you might want to keep an eyeball on them, because it seems to me like Harbor Freight may be on the bubble about whether or not they're trying to discontinue these things. And if they are, they may go on sale. My local Harbor Freight didn't have them on the shelf, so I had to drive one that's, about 10 miles north of me up in Largo. Not a big deal, but still, for the money I saved and hopefully for how well these things are going to work long term, because y'all know me, I'm the worst person in the world on a drill bit. Hey, Mom, how you doing? All right, we got our holes drilled. We got the burrs knocked off of it. Now I'm going to take this stuff over to the table, and I'm going to start pulling wires and extending the wires to where I can hook all the switches up. And these are what we're using. These little guys right here. And we're using them for the starter button. We're just going to use the key switch as the kill switch, because obviously if you turn the key off, the bike's going to shut off. It keeps it simpler that way. But I know a lot of you guys are wondering, how the hell are you going to use a little bitty dinky switch like that for running headlights? Well, I'm going to show you, so sit tight. Well, that was damn brilliant. Small footnote, if you guys are going to use, like citronella candles, especially the ones that are in the little metal bucket, do yourself a favor and don't be dumb like I was and set it on top of the lid of a plastic tote, because guess what? That shit gets hot enough it melts through, and then you got a small matter of a fire you got to deal with. I'm an idiot. Let's get on to wiring up our handlebars. Now, you guys ain't going to be able to see most of me in this video, but the important shit's down here on the tabletop where I'm working at. You guys can be kept company by my little buddy Wally here, okay? He's got the good stuff in him. Anyway, let's wire some bars. We got one switch over here, plus a brake switch, and then we got two switches over here. That's going to be for the dimmer and for the horn. And we are using these 3 itty-bitty little momentary push-button switches. If you notice, I picked different colors for these. Blue, that's for high beam. That's kind of a given. Red, that's what makes it go. That's the starter button. Yellow, yellow's caution, like school buses and stuff. So we're going to use that one for the horn. We're going to correspond our wire colors to the colors of the buttons. That way later on, if we have to go back in here, it's going to be a lot simpler to track our wires down and associate them with what they go to. Now, just for the sake of commonality here, all of our power, like voltage coming up to our buttons, that's all going to be handled with orange wire, because that's Harley standard. Actually, orange-white is what they use for power supply going up to your handlebar switches. We're deviating from that just a little bit, but at least this keeps it somewhat common to where we can have something to compare to. With the rest of this stuff, we're using orange for power in. We're going to use yellow for our horn out, blue for our dimmer out. We're going to use red for our starter button. Pretty self-explanatory, right? We also have to worry about our brake switch. We're going to use white for that one, and what we'll do is we'll just piggyback off of our yellow or off of our orange that is going to be feeding our starter button switch. That way we can provide power up to our brake switch as well. 4 colors, 3 switches. What could go wrong? What I'm going to do is measure out how much wire I need to make the run inside the handlebar. I really don't count these little sprigs of wire that are already pre-soldered onto these switches, because that's 3 inches, and that'll just help me out in the long run because I'll have a little bit of wiggle room there to it. All of these wires are going to have a quick connect plug up underneath the gas tank to where if we need to take this on for service later on down the road, we've got the flexibility we can do that. And I measured it out. I need about 12 inches of wire from where it exits the bottom of the handlebars out to where I'm going to put my connectors up underneath the gas tank. Just to play it safe, I'm going to give it 14 inches. That way I've got a little bit of extra wiggle room to work with. And then we're going to cut it. And we're going to do that twice because we got 2 sides of the handlebars. And then we're done with all of our orange wire. We can put that back in the box where it lives. That way it keeps it from unrolling and turning into a giant mess of copper spaghetti here on top of the workbench. Now, this is really lightweight, 22 gauge wire. I call this stuff wet noodle wire because that's how it behaves. This is a silicone jacketed wire. It's not plastic or rubber. I like using this stuff because of how weebly flexible it is. I mean, it's literally like a wet spaghetti noodle. Now, you guys that are on the Patreon, you'll remember a post that I put up a while back. It was pretty long, you know. It was about wiring do's and don'ts, the advantages of using the silicone jacketed wire over like PVC jacketed wire in certain areas, you know, where you got a lot of flexibility, a lot of movement going on, things like that. And this is no different. All this stuff applies. If you guys are new to the group or new to the channel, y'all can go over and check out the Patreon. It's absolutely free to join. There's no monetary investment required whatsoever. And if you look in the collections under electrical and sparky stuff, I'll have that post written or moved over there to where you guys can find it pretty easily. We need blue, we need yellow, we got our orange, and what we're going to do is we are going to take our 2-wire. Actually, I'm going to grab my other strippers that are actually better suited for doing small bore wire like this and use those. I'll have a link to this JST connector set down in the description. This thing, it's well worth the money because not only do you get a good set of strippers and a good set of crimpers that crimp these little and possibly tiny JST connectors. Anybody in the crowd that rides Big Dog motorcycle, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about there. The strippers that they give you in this set are specifically built with small bore wire in mind. The biggest wire gauge that's on these strippers is 20 gauge, if that tells you anything. And I bought this stuff a long time ago for playing around with my toy cars that you guys see hanging from the rafters here occasionally. And it is excellent for motorcycle stuff as well. All these switches have black and red leads pre-soldered onto them. We're going to use our blacks as our common, our 12 volt in, because these are momentary on. And what we'll do is we'll take one of our orange leads here, skin that back, and we're going to take our 2 black leads. It's going to go over to the left-hand handlebar. And when you're working with stuff this small, it's not terribly easy to get a good solid twist in on your solder, especially if you're a fumbling klutz like I am with big chunkster fingers. So bear with me. I'm doing the best I can here, guys. These were already factory tinned with solder. I'm going to clip them back to where I get rid of that and get down to some usable strand that's not all stuck together. That way I can do a decent twist in before I start trying to flow some solder into these things. I know common sense would dictate that I put this on the red lead, but the way I put it together in my head, I want to have the red lead associated with the power coming out of the switch. That's why I wire it that way. This is not according to any kind of standardized Harley wiring diagram or anything like that. And honestly, you know, this is a custom build, so I'm kind of making it up as I go along. But it makes sense in my head. So we're going to roll with it. Got that braided up about as tight as I can. Already got our soldering iron preheated. I will also put a link up here for my little Amazon soldering station that I use here. I bought this initially for doing my hobby stuff, you know, my RC cars and everything. But man, I tell you what, if you're having to do a bigger project like this, or you're having to do some small detail work, this thing's great, man. I mean, it heats up stupid quick. It's small. One thing that I like is whenever you put the iron back into the holder like that, it doesn't turn it off, but it brings the power down to where it maintains temperature. But whenever you pull it out of there, it comes back up to operating temp really, really quickly. That way you don't have to constantly keep retinning the tip of your soldering iron. Bear with me, I've already got the shakies a little bit because I've had a few too many cups of coffee today. And usually whenever I'm doing work like this, I try to limit how much coffee I drink before I start because of that very reason. You know, hey, it is what it is. So we're going to roll with it. But there we go. Nice, clean, tight. We got good penetration on all that. Here, let me get you a little closer so you can see there. You can see we got good flow in it. Maybe it'll focus. Yeah, there it goes. It focuses. But see, we got good flow. We got good penetration. We got a good bond. But we haven't cooked any of the insulation off, and it's only where it needs to be. It hasn't traveled way far up the wire. Now, we just got to do our individual runs for our yellow and our blue, for our horn and for our high beam. And I bet you guys are still probably wondering how in the hell I'm going to make a single momentary switch into a dimmer for high and low beam headlights. We'll get to that in a minute. This crap here, this lead-free solder, this stuff's absolute trash. I hate it. Don't get me wrong. It's great for doing other things like alloying lead for a very specific reason. We'll leave that at that. But it's lousy for doing electrical soldering because you got to have your temp higher, and it doesn't flow worth a crap, especially on small stuff like this. I need to order me some conventional 6040 lead 10 solder because if it's got lead in it, it flows so much better. And usually whenever I'm covering up these little spliced runs like this with heat shrink, what I'll do is I'll use 2 pieces on each one, and I'll leave it where I've just got a little bit of my original joint sticking out there. Go ahead and shrink that down. If you use 2 pieces on these where you overlap, that builds up a little bit of thickness right there where your solder joint is, and that's going to insulate you from any potential rub throughs or anything like that, but it's not going to really build up any bulk to where it's going to get in the way. If you're having clearance problems because of a little bit of overlap on the shrink tube, then honestly, you either need to drill a bigger hole or you need to rethink your routing because you probably got something jammed in too tight of a space. Lastly, we got this guy. Just to make life a little bit easier here, I'm going to go ahead and take one final piece of shrink tube, and I'm going to tie our brake light switch output lead using that piece of shrink tube. That way we can keep them paired together. There. That way you don't try to run off and hide on us. Now I have you guys a link to some of that wet noodle wire like I was talking about, and it's available in all of your standard gauge sizes and colors, what have you, what have you. It's a little bit more expensive than the regular PVC jacketed stuff or the plastic coated stuff, but on something like this, it's really worth spending the extra money just for the extra flexibility that it affords you. Because, I mean, let's be real here. Look at that. Would you look at that? And here we go. Got our bars done. May not look like a whole lot, but it's really not intended to look like a whole lot. Basic, Becky, get the job done, no frills, nothing else. You got a starter button here, brake light switch lead here. We got to put a couple terminals on that still. You got your dimmer switch, then you got your horn button right here. So let me get these thrown up on the bike, and then I'll show you how we're going to make this little dimmer switch work when we've only got 2 wires. Okay, slight pause because fat kid needed to feed, and also I got to work out a little bit of a spacing problem on the front wheel on the thing. I ain't got a fancy name for it this episode. I'm working on that though. Slight derailment of plans here. I have to embark on a side quest, if you will, because I didn't have the right size wheel spacer I needed here to space over the front wheel to keep the rotor bolts from rubbing on the fork leg. So I thought, well, hey, I'll throw it on the lathe real quick and I'll make one. Just turn one down a little bit. That was when the power switch on my lathe decided to go. It literally flew apart and shot its way halfway across the shop. Okay, I cheated. Basically, I had to hotwire my lathe around the switch because Home Depot didn't have the one that they said they had. And that was going to shut me down for a couple of days while I was waiting on one that I was going to have to order. So we improvised. So let's make a wheel spacer. See, the original wheel spacer that we had measures that at 0.375 inch, and that wasn't quite enough. And we need another eighth of an inch on there, so that'll bring us out to exactly 0.500 if we add an eighth of an inch, because an eighth of an inch is 0.125 when you break it down into decimals. That guy right there measures out at 646, call it, something like that. So let's abbreviate it a little bit and get it back down to that 500 number that we're looking for that'll work so well for us. Now, my mini lathe here does not have a scale on the lead screw or on the carriage, and I don't trust this scale that's here on the compound slide. So I've got to set this up to where I can cut a little bit, measure it, cut a little bit, measure it, cut a little bit, measure it. The trick is you can't pull it out of the chuck jaws or else you lose concentricity. So that's why I've got that guy spaced out. I need to space him out a little bit more to where I can get my calipers in there and I can get a measurement off of it without having to pull it out of the chuck. Actually, let me see if I can grab this from the inside real quick. Nope. Damn it. Well, it started off sounding like a good idea. And full disclosure here, my equipment problems with my mini lathe are completely my fault, because since I got the bigger lathe, I really haven't done anything with this thing in about a year. And to be honest with you guys, I've debated about selling it. So if anybody is looking for a honestly good condition outside of being a little dusty hobby grade tabletop lathe, hit me up over on Patreon. Let's talk a little bit. And that's crooked as all hell. So let's straighten it up. A little trick an old man showed me one time. You can drop a parting blade or a tool holder, pretty much anything in there, just as long as you're running it in the opposite direction that it's supposed to cut in. And if you put a little bit of pressure on it before you tighten the jaws up all the way, boom, right there. Straightens her up nice, straight and pretty. So let's go around and snug her chuck up just a little bit. There. Yeah, we're still running good there. All right, let's thin this sucker down and make some chips. That way we can bolt a wheel on. By the way, told y'all I went to the store today. I know y'all was worried about me. I remembered to buy a pair this time. Hear that sound? That's a cry for help. That's my machine's way of letting me know, hey, fat boy, you're getting greedy. That's one thing about these little tabletop machines like this. Whenever you start pushing them to the point where you're getting into some chatter, they are not subtle about it, man. They will let you know in a heartbeat. Give her a 5,000 skim and we are good. Ah, 2,000 under. Never going to miss it. Now, before we pull that out of there, let's knock some burrs off of it. Because I, for one, do not like sharp and pokey things trying to hurt my pitties. Now you notice whenever I was doing that, I was running it backwards where the chuck was turning away from me. There's a reason for that. Yes, files are directional, but also so are lathes. And if this thing hooks my file, I would much rather it try to take it out of my hand and go that way rather than it catch it and try to fling it back in my face. Good there. Good there. All right, cool. Now let's put all this crap back together and see how it works. This feels oddly familiar, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Damn, that wheel's half-ass crooked. Wait, focus, one thing at a time. We'll come back and deal with that later on, because it needs a truing, bad. Aha, success. Okay, our wheel's tracking straight, it's right in the middle of the forks, and most importantly, our brake rubber bolts ain't rubbing on the fork leg anymore. Ew. It goosed at me. So we got our donor brake caliper of questionable lineage because it was like 20 bucks on eBay. Put that guy in there, that guy right there, that guy goes right there, and hey, we got a caliper. Now let's see if it'll fit on a motorcycle. Uh-oh. Well, guess what, kids? Brake caliper doesn't go on there. So we got to recut our wheel spacer. And whether I like it or not, I'm going to have to shift that wheel over to the right side just a little bit to where I can make everything play happy with one another. Because I am not going to break that wheel down and skim the face of that hub to move the rotor and all that stuff over 50 thousandths of an inch. No, sir. Not on this one. And the sad part of this is that 50 thou will get me good. I started out with a spacer that was 0.625. I cut it to 500. I should have just skimmed a quarter off of it and called it a day. But didn't have any way of knowing that the caliper wasn't going to bolt up because I hadn't tried it at that point. So live and learn. That's okay. We always need half-inch wheel spacers for something. See, there's my problem. Ain't supposed to look like that. It went poof. There's my solution right now because I ain't got any spare fuses because I've never blown a fuse on that lathe in the 5 years I've owned it. Is it something I recommend? Nope. Is it something that's OSHA approved? Is it something I'm going to do to get me by? Yeah. And for those of you out there that may be wondering, yes, I'm wearing my OSHA approved Jerusalem cruisers right now. No, I don't condone wearing flip-flops when you're operating machinery like this, but, you know, hey. I never said do exactly as I do. You know what I mean? Okay, let's try this shit again. Thank the dear Lord baby Jesus, the damn thing fits. Let's bolt this thing up. This part of it's actually going to go according to plan. Give her a little shot of brake clean just to make sure. What we're going to do is we're going to put a P-clamp right here on the bottom of the tree, kind of like what they do on the other side, but we're putting it on this side because I don't have one on this side. It's on the other side, but anyway, y'all get the idea. I got to put something here to control this brake hose and to guide it to keep it from flexing into the tire whenever the suspension compresses. And also the fender itself, we're going to have a guide wire on it to keep this over off to the side to, again, keep it from getting sucked into the tire. Because on a street tire, it's bad enough. On this, we got knobbies and stuff that like to grab and pull things. And before I do the dumb move that I always do, I'm going to tighten up my brake line. Nope, we're not going to do that. That'll break. Yep, that would have broke if I'd have tightened that up the rest of the way. The only thing that I'm not real wild about these Amazon brake hoses, and this is a personal thing, but if you think about it, it makes sense. The fittings they use on these, they're aluminum, not steel. And that being said, they're a little bit on the brittle side. I would feel better about it if they were a steel fitting, but I'm not going to totally poo-poo them just because they're not. But one thing you got to take into consideration, though, is everything's got to line up. If anything's in a bind, whenever you tighten something down, it's going to crack. It's not going to bend, it'll break.
Look at this idiot right here. Yeah, the one that didn't realize his microphone was dead and he was busy showing off his brand-ass new shirt. Still had the wrinkles straight out of the package. Anyway, let's try to muddle through this as best we can. That way I can explain to you how this latching relay that works our dimmer switch functions. Okay, what this is a little bitty solid-state latching relay. And it's very small, but it also can handle up to 10 amps continuous current draw on it, so it makes it ideal for LEDs. Incandescent and halogen bulbs, not so much, because they're going to pull a little bit too much current, but the way it works is it receives a low voltage input signal, and that closes the contacts of the relay to allow it to power the output device. Basically, what it does is whenever you tell it to, it connects it, and it keeps it connected until you either remove the power supply from it or you tell it, hey, disconnect. So what we got set up here, we got our little power supply that I showed you guys a few weeks ago, and I originally bought this primarily for derusting fuel tanks, but I've always wanted one just where I could have a stable, constant power supply on the bench and, be able to vary my voltage up and down to where I could test components and things like that. So the reason I've got the battery there is I was playing around with a couple of different ways of setting this up. And honestly, for the video, this was the easiest way to show you how this hooks up and how it functions. Because if I tried to run all of it off of the power supply, I would have had a mess of spaghetti with wires going everywhere, and it just would have looked like crap. As it is, I'm kind of struggling with this a little bit because the voiceover makes things kind of awkward, but hang out there with me and let's see what we can learn from this, shall we? Right here, I was pointing out you've got 12-volt positive and also ground that hooks up to the input side of the relay. That provides power strictly for the relay. That's not your input power for whatever device or light that you happen to be controlling it with. I tried to zoom in there to show a little bit of detail to you guys, but you can see that red LED is glowing right there. That means that the relay is powered up and it's receiving power from our power supply. See, I'm pointing at it with my big chonster finger there. Now, that will come on anytime there's power available to the relay for it to function. Now, it's got a small micro switch on it to where you can test it and also where you can trigger the relay on and off. Now, on the output side of that relay, you've got a common, and then you've got a normally open and a normally closed. And that's going to dictate how you wire up your accessory or whatever you're using the relay to control. In this case, we've got our common, which is 12 volts in, coming into that. And then on our normally closed, our normally open, we have our 12 volt output going to the LED bulb itself. And then from the ground side of the LED bulb, which is basically the flange that bolts it into the headlight, we've got a lead that runs up to the red LED is lit up. That means that the relay itself is receiving power on the input side from its power supply. Now, I disconnected the ground to the light right there so I could toggle the relay. Right there, the green light coming on means that the relay is active. That means that it is closing the circuit between the normally closed, and the common, which is how I have this wired up. The 12 volts coming into the load side of the relay comes from your 12 volt positive, or battery in this case. And then our 12 volt positive going out to our bulb comes off of that normally closed side whenever the relay is activated. Now I've got the ground wire disconnected, so I didn't blind everybody. So let's hook it back up and let me show you how this thing works. So we got our ground applied to the bulb, hit our switch. If you're light sensitive, you might want to look away now. Hit the switch, bam, light bulb comes on. Okay, cool. We got electrons flowing. So right now, the relay itself is carrying the load. The voltage coming into the relay assembly, that is strictly just to toggle the relay, or to power the guts of the relay up to where it can receive that signal, latch the relay to apply load out to our light bulb. Basically, it's a fancy remote relay, for lack of a better term. Now, it's kind of a pain in the butt to fumble around for that itty bitty little button on there. So here's how we tie this into the handlebars, and we only make it work with one wire. What I'm showing you right there is a 2.5 millimeter JST connector. It's a 2-pin lead, but if you guys own a big dog motorcycle, you're probably very aware of what these things are, and you've probably cussed them like a dog every day you've had the bike. If you look in the close-up there, yeah, it's tiny. It's damn small. Those are 26 gauge wires coming out of that. Now, one of those is going to have a low voltage 5 volt trigger signal that's applied to it anytime the relay is receiving power. The other one is the input sense, which is basically where it's looking to see that 5 volts back to energize the relay and turn on your accessory. So what we do is we power up the relay off of the bike's harness, and then we use that 5 volt input going up to our momentary switch, and we're only running 5 volts up to our momentary switch. We're not running a full 12 volts up to it. So what we do is we plug it in, we wire it into that, plug that little guy right there into its port on the board, and then blammo, you got a dimmer switch, because it's looking for that 5 volt impulse. As soon as you hit the button, it sends a command signal to the relay. The relay pulls in, and the relay closes your high load circuit that powers up your headlight bulb. And it'll hold it as long as there is power being applied to the relay assembly. In this case, that would be from the wiring harness on the motorcycle. What I'm doing right here is I'm showing you how one side of that input receives a 5 volt reference voltage, and the other side is just looking to see that 5 volts back. So we probe the positive side of the command socket on the relay assembly. We see the 5 volts there. Now, if we take those two wires and touch them together, bam, we got a light bulb that lights up. Touch them again, light bulb goes out. Real simple. Now, here's the cool thing. We only have to run one of those wires, because we can put a resistor in line and we can run it on 12 volts as long as we've got the right value resistor in there to step that 12 volts down to 5 volts, because the board on this little guy doesn't like more than 5 volts on that input side. I found that out the hard way because luckily I bought a 2-pack of these, and one of them, he sacrificed himself for the cause, so to speak. So we're all learning here. Here I am looking at the camera, thinking that I'm trying to explain something, and I actually went into great detail here. But here we are. So at the end of the day, that little guy right there, he's real tiny. He's only 2 inches long. He's right at 1 inch wide and 3/4 of an inch tall. You can hide him just damn near anywhere. And also, because they can handle a continuous 10 amps, they add a lot of versatility to accessory lights, like, say, fog lights, driving lights, things like that, or underglow if you're into that sort of thing. Me personally, it doesn't do nothing for me, but, hey, to each their own. Now, one thing I wanted to point out right here at this part is the circuit board on this is open and exposed on the backside. So if you're going to use this in an area where it may get wet or something like that, take a little piece of foam rubber, put that on the backside where the solder pins are all grouped up and waiting to rub up against something and short out on something. And then slide the whole thing inside of some 1.5 1.25 shrink tube, shrink it down real good, and then use some small runs of shrink tube where your wires come in and out to supply, power in and then power and load coming out of the relay. That way you can give it its best chance for life, okay? Don't be stingy with the shrink tube. You'd be surprised at just what you can get away with that stuff and how well it actually insulates and waterproofs. Now, right here, I was singing the praises of SHORAI batteries. That particular battery you see sitting on my workbench right there, I have had that battery in my possession for approximately 6 years at this point. It is exactly the same battery that I've got in the Bastard Glide that I ride every day, and that battery I've had in my possession for 7 years at this point. I took both of these batteries out of trade-in bikes at the dealership here in St. Pete that I used to work at before I went to work for the Ride Factory. And in both cases, they were the wrong batteries for the application. They weren't necessarily bad, but they just weren't big enough for what they were in. Both of these just happened to be in Harley touring models. Anyway, long story short, a lot of people ask me whether or not the additional expense of a lithium battery is worth it. If you are riding your stuff on the regular, or if your bike sits for an extended period of time, I can say absolutely unequivocally, yes, it is. And I'm fixing to show you that in the video right here. That battery, it has been sitting on a shelf in my garage for approximately 2 years now since it's been charged. And watch what happens whenever I stick the leads for my voltmeter on this thing. Bam. Right there. Little crummy connection, 13, let's go ahead and call that 13.1 volts there, just from the scabby connection on the battery bolts there. It's not the best connection in the world, but it gets it done. So there we have it. 13.1 volts on a battery that has not been charged and has been sitting on a shelf in my garage for 2 years now. That's kind of hard to argue with right there, folks. And here we have the epiphany of, oh my God, I have no electrons. Duh.
Well, my smooth brain done it again. I got to go back through all this and see just exactly where my audio crapped on me because I didn't realize that my microphone died. I'll touch back with you on this, and whatever parts of it I got to do a voiceover on just to kind of fill in the blanks, I will. But this feels especially odd considering I just had this conversation with you guys 30 seconds ago. What I was getting at on the lithium batteries, yes, they are more expensive than a conventional lead-acid battery. Yes, they do require a specific type of charger to maintain them, not to charge them if they get run down. All you need there is just your cell phone with an alarm clock set. Don't ever charge one for more than 2 hours on a conventional charger. But don't ever charge them on a charger that's going to push more than 15 volts back into the battery either. You got to monitor your battery voltage. So if you're charging one with a conventional charger, make sure you hook a voltmeter up. That way you can make sure that the charger's not pushing too much voltage into the battery. Because if it does that, it'll swell up. It'll look like, little cousin Susie did after, prom night, and she made some bad life choices. But anyway, what? I'm getting heckled from the peanut gallery over here. Like I was saying, if you're wondering if the lithium batteries are worth it, yes, they absolutely are. Here, let me grab this thing. I don't have a scale out here. I don't have a banana for scale, but you can see how small this battery is, okay? I mean, that's tiny. Weighs about 1.5 pounds. It starts my junk every damn day. Now, the pitfall is the retail price on this battery, I think right about now it's somewhere around the $275, $285 mark, something like that. Yeah, that's a big pill to swallow for a battery. Ultimately, it's up to you guys. You got to figure out whether the juice is worth the squeeze to you, so to speak.
Right here is when I realized that my mic had crapped on me again. And it's probably a good thing it wasn't picking up because I was saying a whole lot of things that my mama wouldn't approve of in any context. Sometimes you just got to know when to walk away.
All right, just to wrap things up here and kind of recap what we did today. Got the exhaust thing worked out. I got to go by Lowe's and pick up some bolts because I came up a little bit short on a couple of them. No big deal. I just didn't feel like running out and grabbing that stuff. But we got all of our issues resolved on that as far as spacing, clearance, all that stuff. That way, all we got to do is just bolt it up, hang it on there, call it good. It's a done deal. We got our wheel spacing problem on the front end resolved. I ended up having to cut a spacer twice, measure, well, don't measure once, cut 4 times. Yeah, anyway, I should have measured it in the first damn place. I didn't. Shame on me. And also, we learned how to hotwire a mini lathe. So that's a plus. You know, that's a freebie for you guys. Bumpkin tip. We got our bars built. We got them on the bike. We got our brake line done. We got our front wheel spacing done. We got our brake line on. We got our caliper hung, all that. I got to pick up some brake fluid tomorrow to where I can bleed these things out because Harley, .5, I don't have that here at the house. I was out, so I got to pick some up. All that's a done deal. So next week, we should have this thing down on the ground and making potato sounds. So stay tuned. Oh, by the way, just to give you guys an update, all right? This bike is a bike that's going to be given away at an absolutely random drawing from one of our Patreon members. So if you're not over there, hey, stop in, sign up, look around, see if you like it, because it costs you absolutely nothing to be a member on my Patreon. Now, obviously, there are tiers on there to where if you choose to do so, you can contribute a little bit to kind of help keep the ball rolling with projects like this and stuff that we've got lined up behind this. I'm keeping those under my hat for now because I got a couple of cool ones lined up, and I think you guys are really going to dig those. ForgottenAngelsFlorida.org. If you don't know what they're about, check them out. Do some reading. Educate yourself. There's some damn good people doing some damn good things for kids that just never really got a chance in the first place, much less a first chance. That's what they do, and that's what we try to help them with, is give them that first chance to take that first step into an actual productive life and not end up being a statistic. Okay, that pretty much does it for here. So let's go through the carnage count for today. 1 dead microphone, 1 dead battery. God knows how many hours I'm going to spend editing this and doing voiceover stuff. 1 small fire. It was contained. I caught it quick. No fire extinguishers were involved, just a lot of stomping. I did lose a little bit of hair on my pinky toe on my right foot because tactical flip-flops, but, hey, that's a price you pay for living in Florida. If you guys aren't already a subscriber, please consider subscribing. If you like the video, smash it, lick it, like it, love it, scattered, covered, smothered, chunked, whatever it. Do whatever you want to do with the like button, okay? Also, we got to keep Gary happy. Okay? Make sure you hit that bell to get notifications whenever we have a new video coming up, because a lot of people haven't been getting notifications here lately. I'm not exactly sure why. Keep Gary happy, because you know how Gary gets, okay? So until next time, guys, I love you. I look forward to seeing you in the live chat and the comments. And, hey, let's get together and do this again sometime here real damn soon, okay? Until I get a chance to do that, I'll catch you on the flip side. Where the hell is my remote? Remote. Need to paint it pink. That way it matches the shirt.
Force will be with you, always.